What's up, my family? Listen, first-time listener, or you've been here the whole damn time. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, giddy up, let's go, no notes.
That's my baby. That's my baby.
We're going at it at 110%.
I just want 5 minutes of happiness, please. Just give me 5 minutes.
And they scored! They did it!
What the hell was that? Oh, yeah!
What the f*** are you talking about?
Hey there, hi there, hello there. I'm your host, Les Bowen, for Bowen On The Birds on a gloomy Friday afternoon in South Jersey. I look like I'm in a cavern somewhere, but I'm actually still in my living room as usual with the usual stuff behind me. You just can't see it. But the Eagles are in the bye week. Nonetheless, we'll still talk about them and many other things, I hope. We have our first guest today, veteran of WIP, author, actor, cinephile, beer guy, star of stage and screen, Glen Macnow. Let's bring Glen up into the conversation. There he is. I'd recognize him anywhere. Pride of Buffalo, New York.
Nice to see you, pal. I'm doing great. Nice to see you, man. Very nice to see you.
Yes. So you've got a lot of things going on for an old guy like me. I don't have that much, but you're more ambitious. So tell me, this beer show that you do on Comcast or whatever they're calling it now, on Saturday nights. Now you have Don Russell, I guess, a lot, right?
Did.
So Don lives in France. So how does this work?
With difficulty.
Yeah.
So Don and I started a podcast years ago. At the time we called it Bar Talk, which was about beer.
Mm-hmm.
Don knows beer as well as anybody around. He wrote a column for years under the name Joe Sixpack. He is the authority on beer in the Delaware Valley, always was. And the podcast was successful. We got the opportunity to take it to TV. So 6 years ago, we took it to TV, and it's been running regularly on NBC Sports Philadelphia. We're technically in our 8th season, which is amazing because the entire conceit of the show is just literally two guys sitting around drinking beer and talking about it, and you're supposed to watch that, which sounds ridiculous, but that's what it was. Don and his wife, Teresa, decided to move to France last year. They did. He went from being full-time on the show to just kind of doing a segment on the show or a segment on every other show. Mm-hmm. I've been working with rotating guest hosts, some of my colleagues, newspaper, radio, TV, some sports figures, and there's a guy, Lou Bryson, who's a real whiskey authority and a beer authority.
Oh, good. Okay.
And Lou lived here. He ended up moving to Penn State, so it's hard to get him to come back, but sometimes we meet in the middle. We just did 3 shows out in Harrisburg and Hershey, so I got kind of rotating cast.
Oh, that's really cool. Now, I have a hard beer question for you. I hate IPAs. I do not like the bitter aftertaste sort of thing.
Yeah.
What can you say to make me like IPAs? Or is there an IPA that is not does not leave me with that?
All right. Well, so my question is, do you hate both West Coast IPAs and then hazy New England IPAs? Because there's a difference between the two. I'm fine on a West Coast IPA. Those are the hoppy ones. Those are the bitter ones. Those will make that face again, would you? Yeah, that. Okay. Hazy New England IPAs are more citrusy.
Okay.
And to me, those are the ones that I really love. My theory with a glass of beer is if I can't, those are unfiltered, and I don't want to get into all the technical parts of it, but essentially, if I can't see through my beer, if it's hazy like that, I know I'm going to like it. So try a hazy IPA and keep it on the lower end of the hop spectrum, of the alcohol spectrum. Find one under 7%. Let me know what you think.
I certainly will. That's very good advice because I feel left out. Everyone else in my family, both my sons and my wife, they're IPA people, and I'm sitting there thinking, do you have a lager I can have? That's
well, but see, here's the thing. Like wine, beer has attracted its snob, its legion of snobs. I don't want to be that. If you want to drink a Miller Lite and that's what you like, drink a Miller Lite.
Yeah.
Go with lagers if you like them. Go with pilsners if you like them. It's wintertime. Try a nice stout, a nice porter. Just my advice to everybody is just try everything and find what you like. You don't have to like what I like.
Okay. Well, that's good advice. So 30 years on WIP coming up, right?
Yeah, December 6th. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Does it seem like 30 years to you?
Well, here's the funny thing. I remember when the opportunity came up, I was at the Inquirer at the time. I wasn't loving it. There was a sports editor there that I really did not like working for. I had done newspapers for 16 years, and it was finding it kind of repetitive. I was ready to make a change. And when the opportunity came up to go to WIP, it was a real fledgling station. I mean, Angelo Cataldi was there, which really is the reason it survived all those years. Al Morgani was there, Mike Missinelli. There were some really solid people there. But it was
you were the first non-Italian they ever hired.
Maybe so. You may be right. Steve Fredericks. Steve was
okay. Yeah.
Right. Steve was a member of the tribe. Anyway, but I remember my wife and I discussing it because it was a risk. We didn't know if this thing was. Who the heck's going to listen to sports talk radio 24 hours a day? That sounds stupid. And I thought, you know what? If I can get 5 years out of this, it'll be worth it, and then I'll figure out what to do. And yeah, so 5 years came and went a long time ago, and it'll be 30. Does it seem like 30? I mean, yes, but not in a bad way. I feel like I've been doing it my entire life.
Yeah. I can certainly understand that. Absolutely. One aspect of talk radio, obviously, is the audience, a very big aspect of it. This is something that actually you brought up in a text with me earlier this week, and I've discussed it on the pod with Phil Sheridan a few weeks ago. The fan base, the listeners to radio, and the people that read my work if I write something or watch this podcast or whatever, it's changed. I think the fan base has over the years. And I've been thinking about this quite a bit, and I have some theories that you might agree with or might disagree with. But when you think about like you, I didn't grow up here. I grew up in Charlotte. When they threw snowballs at Santa and were trying to get rid of Joe Kuharich, I was like 12 years old in North Carolina. And I think you were about the same age in Buffalo, and I had no idea any of this was going on. But if you look at a Philadelphia fan of that era, that would be somebody whose football team had one really good year in 1960 and then been horrible since then, whose baseball team had been horrible forever, except there was another baseball team that was pretty good that left.
Yeah.
The A's, and the basketball team, the Warriors, left and became an expansion team. I mean, it was a bleak thing to be a Philadelphia sports fan. Like, I don't think we talked about the championship drought, which was very real and very, deeply felt. But hey, if you're an Eagles fan, my son's age, let's say, and you started really paying attention around 2000, you've seen 5 losing seasons in a quarter century.
Yeah.
It's just not the same deal with any of these teams. Even the Phillies, who went through some bad times, in recent years, they aren't anywhere near. They were the losingest franchise in professional sports because of what happened in the earlier part of the 20th century.
Yeah, so
it's a different landscape.
When I started on WIP, which was the very end of 1993, right? The people who are in their 40s, which is kind of right in the middle of the snake in terms of your listeners, right?
Yeah.
Their point of reference was the 64 Phillies.
Yeah.
Right. And the collapse. And that's what they were teenagers when that happened. And that's when, to my mind, that's when you care the most, right? You're 12 to 20 years old is when you just live with this stuff. So that's what they grew up with. That's what they knew. And they felt ultimately these teams are going to break our hearts because that's what they do. Yeah. And so for the first 20 years or so, the majority of my audience were people who were very, very pessimistic. And there was good cause for that. As you said, the championship drought that went from 1983, the Sixers in June of 83, to the Phillies in October 2008. That's 25 years. That's 100 teams. It's 100 seasons in which there was not a championship. So they were understandably pretty negative about it. Now, if you're 40 years old, it means you were born in 1983, means that, like your sons, you got to grow up with a football team that was pretty good. And Buddy's teams ultimately disappointed in the playoffs. So, boy, they were fun.
Yeah,
they were fun to watch. They really were. And when you were a little kid, you saw the '93 Phillies, and yeah, they didn't win it, but that was a fun team. And then you got 2008, which was the end of the drought, which was the champagne popping, and then 2017. It may be 9 years, but really it's not. It's not that long. The people in 1964, God bless them, not as many of them are around as were. And the audience grew younger, much more optimistic, much more positive. I'll let you introduce what happened with our station and Trey Turner this year. But to me, that was a real landmark moment. To me, that's the official end of Snowballs at Santa and the entire flip side of that moment.
Well, I suspect nationally that won't be the case. People will still cling to that narrative nonetheless. But I think we know, better. Yeah, your station, one of the hosts on your station, very.
Sorry, turn off my phone.
Glenn.
Got it. Sorry.
We don't take calls on this.
Poor
show.
Preparation. My mistake.
That's okay. No, one of the hosts on your station suggested Trey Turner he signed this gigantic free agent contract, and he was having a terrible year. And the first thing I saw on talk radio was suggestions that they somehow try to rid themselves of Trey Turner, which would have been that they couldn't. There was no viable way to do that. But then somebody came up with the idea of, was it Jack Fritz? Was that?
It was Jack Fritz. Jack's a host, and he's also the producer of the afternoon show with Ike Reese and John Marks.
Yes.
And he said, you know what? Let's just, at this game, at this moment, give this guy a standing ovation. And it was more than just clever radio, because needless to say, it attracted an audience and filled the phone lines for a couple days. It turned out to be something that everybody did. And whether it was coincidence, and Trey Turner said it was more than coincidence, at that point, his season turned around and he became the player they thought they had signed. And the Phillies end up winning the 2 rounds in the playoffs, and all was great. And we did it. I don't mean we WIP, but we, the fan base, felt like we actually played a role in this success. And WIP.
And that's incredible, because this fan base loves that narrative so much. That with the cheering and making the atmosphere at the games as hostile to the other team as possible. A lot of fan bases do that. There have been times when I've thought, the crowd isn't going to, even up a talent disparity very much. But this is one instance where it happened exactly the way the fan base loves to see itself. This. Oh,
we are interactive. We have an impact. We believe that we're absolutely somebody who's involved. By the way, can I answer somebody who just texted during the show?
Sure.
Said, didn't the Flyers end the drought? The Flyers, when they won in 1973, 74, 75, won the 2 of them in those seasons, ended a very short drought, because the Sixers had won in 67.
Right.
I'm talking about the drought that began when the Sixers won the last one in 1983 that extended to 2008. Yeah. That was the drought. But our fan base believes that we are actually a participant in the game. And it is not for me as a talk show host to tell them that they're not.
Right. This was the perfect embodiment of that. It was really amazing. It was an incredible thing.
And then the outgrowth of that is the very, very positive national coverage that we get when the Phillies are in the playoffs, and the crowds are insane. They start the playoffs at Tampa, and they don't even sell the thing out.
Yeah.
And then they go to Philadelphia, and everybody, 48,000, whatever it is, people are up and screaming and cheering and so on. And Listen, I really do believe it's a great fan base. I know every cliche, we're passionate, we're this, and I know it's pandering for me and my job to say all that, but I really do believe it. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, as a writer, I always felt that I never looked for a job in any other market after I got here. Part of it was because my wife also worked, and it would be a hell of a thing to try to move to. But the other part of it was that I just didn't feel there's no other big market where the passion is as strong, where sports matters as much.
Sports matters. I think that's really the right way to say it. And listen, like you, I came up in newspapers, and I don't know every stop you had along the way, but I started my career at Cocoa Beach, Florida, small paper. Then I went to Fort Lauderdale. Then I went to Detroit. Then I came here. And then, and I had 2 little kids. Like at a certain point, you don't want to move.
Right.
But ending up in Philadelphia was the best thing that ever happened for me and for my family.
Glenn, we're going to have to go to commercial here. We'll be right back with you and talk to you about some other fascinating stuff on the other side. I've got to let the dog in. She's really ticked off in the rain.
Go for it.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
In our family, food is our daily bond. My nonna, affectionately called Mama by many, found solace and joy in the kitchen, sharing her love through delicious creations. She turned her culinary passion into a flourishing business alongside her husband and sons in 1983. Celebrating 40 years is a testament to our exceptional team, friends, family, and beloved customers. With gratitude, we look forward to the future, expanding our brand to share the highest quality Italian food and wine nationwide. Our heartfelt thanks to everyone who has played a part in our story. Grazie mille.
And we're back for the second segment of Bowen on the Birds on this very gloomy Friday afternoon with Glen Macnow from WIP and his many other ventures. And I wanted to talk a little bit, Glenn, about sports media. We were getting into that a little bit before we took the break. Not only is the audience a lot different than it was, I think, 20 or 30 years ago, but the way people get their information and the types of things that give them that information are quite different than they used to be. And for me, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, the internet and all the different stats that are available and different types of people getting into the business and so forth. It's very interesting and very invigorating in some senses. But I also feel like I'm a guy who got into this because I wanted to make a living writing.
Yeah.
Sports was kind of the way I got in. I did that, but it wasn't really, I'm not doing this because I was just such an incredible sports fan and I couldn't stand not being around sports 24 hours a day. Truth is, I could have, but yeah, I wanted to write, make people feel, wanted to, I don't know if I was ever successful, but evoke things, take people inside situations, what it felt like, what it smelled like, and you see less and less of that in today's sports writing.
Writing. What a quaint notion.
Yeah, it kind of is.
It is. Listen, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Go ahead. I do have something else to say there. Go ahead.
I mean, I kind of am the same way. I loved sports growing up and followed it intently, but I didn't go into becoming a sports writer. I covered politics. I covered education. I was a magazine writer and kind of landed on sports business in Detroit, and then ended up coming to the Inquirer to cover sports business, which was kind of a relatively new beat. I was not a guy who went into the locker rooms on a regular basis and interviewed athletes. I mostly wrote the stories that none of these other sports writers wanted to touch. So you're welcome.
The ones that involved hard work. Yeah.
It was work, but it was really the opportunity to write. And oh my gosh, when I was at the Inquirer, Angelo Cataldi and I teamed up on a couple of projects, and God bless the editors at the time, they gave us like 2 months to do a 6-part series on team doctors and the conflicts of interest there, and other things like that we got to do. We did a series on sports gambling before it was what it is now. That again, we got to spend more than a month on that, and we got to write. I mean, we got 100 inches, which is 4,500 words, and now if it's not delivered in 180 characters, you can't do it. Yes. I mean, it's a change. I think obviously the Athletic has tried to make it with long form writing. I'll be surprised if the Athletic's here in 5 years.
Well, I think they've switched their model quite dramatically.
You're right. They already have. And the New York Times closed its sports department to just have the Athletic cover it, which to me was just a travesty. Listen, I can't rue the old days too much because times change and you have to change with them. And there still is some excellent writing somewhere. There's excellent columnists in this town.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
And I respect that, and I read and I follow those people still. But it's clear that everybody's attention span got shorter, and I'll always blame Sesame Street for that, but that's my own personal gripe. And everybody wants it fast and quick and change, and that's what it is. And you can't fight it.
Right.
Well, I was going to say go read books, but there's not as many books being written either.
Well, Zach Berman and Bo Wolf left the Athletic.
I know.
With this new entity that Anthony Gargano is helming. And I talked to Zach about this, and I don't think I'm betraying any confidence or saying anything he doesn't want public here, but he's a guy who's basically been a writer his whole career. And he feels like he needs to get into that. Their basic thing, they do writing, but basically it's these daily podcasts they do.
Yeah.
That is their business model. And he felt like he needed to get a lot better on video, as a young guy who's going to hopefully be working in sports in 20 years, and that saddened me a little bit.
Well, so I taught journalism at St. Joe's for about 6 years. And really the biggest reason I stopped is because I would have these kids come to me at the end of the semester and say, hey, this was really fun. How do I find a job? And I couldn't really promise them that there were careers out there for them. But one piece of advice I had for them, and I have for everybody, is who's going into the business, who wants to be a writer, is you got to get good at everything. You got to be able to deliver on TV. You got to be able to deliver on radio. You got to be able to write long form. You got to be able to attract a following on social media. You really got to, synergy, whatever. Use all of your talents and spread yourself out, and make yourself the product. You're the personality. You're the product. And we see the people who do well locally and do well nationally. It's not just because they're good writers, but you really have to have a talent and an intriguing personality.
A brand. Yeah.
A brand. You are your brand. I'm not the first person to say that, but I really believe that's something that really changed when we went into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just having a byline at the top of the story, that was thrill enough to me. I didn't need people to know who I was or what I looked like, God forbid, or what I sounded like. And now you can't get by without that.
That's exactly true. Well, time is fleeting here, and they're going to be real mad at me if we don't discuss the Eagles at all during this half hour.
Okay.
The Eagles are at the bye. They're 8-1, but as you know, they are a very exasperating 8-1. Their point differential is nowhere near what it should be for a team that's 8-1. They've had 3 wins that weren't one-score wins all season. Their Sunday game against Dallas was very indicative of this. They basically tried to hand the game to the Cowboys in the last few minutes, and the Cowboys let it drop through their hands.
Being the Cowboys, they gave it right back. Yes.
So a lot of us don't know how we feel about this team. How do you feel about this team? What do you see?
I think the Eagles have been lucky to some degree. I think the Eagles have underperformed to a certain degree. I think the next 5 weeks are going to be certainly a time where they got to get it together, as you have Kansas City and Buffalo and San Francisco and Dallas and Seattle. I think 3 of those games are on the road, I believe. And that's going to be a real test. If they win 3 out of 5, to me, they will have passed that test. But the other part of what I'm going to say is currently they don't look as good as they did last year. Again, it's November, so a lot of things happen between now and the end of the year. But I also think, just staying in the NFC, there's nobody else that looks that good to me.
Right.
I think the whole league is down this year. I just don't think the product is great.
Well, scoring is definitely down.
Yeah. And I don't know that it's just because defenses are better. I mean, I guess it must be, but I just don't think there's a super team this year, including Kansas City.
Right.
So,
yeah.
You know what? So if you can win the Super Bowl in a year where everybody else isn't that good, you've still won the Super Bowl.
That's absolutely true, Glenn. And that happens. We've all seen that happen.
Nobody minds that the Phillies beat the Tampa Rays for the World Series in 2008, and not the Red Sox, who everybody thought was the best team. It still counts.
And the other side of that coin is the first year I covered the Eagles was the year they lost to Tampa in the NFC Championship.
Oh, that was a killer.
But my point in this is Tampa then went on to play the Raiders in the Super Bowl. And I covered a whole bunch of Super Bowls for the Daily News and the Inquirer. That Raiders team is the worst team I ever saw make a Super Bowl.
Right. But in Tampa, they got their trophy.
Yes.
And nobody in Tampa minds that they got their trophy.
That just made me sick in San Diego, sitting there in the press box.
The Eagles had every chance to win.
150-year-old Rich Gannon. No offense, Rich, but 190-year-old Jerry Rice, and their center got
disappeared.
Caught in Mexico.
I think the Eagles still have much time to I hate to say get it together. I mean, they're 8-1, but I think they have time to kind of perfect it. The only real concern I have, Goddard's a concern, losing him, but but Jalen Hurts' knee is something that I don't think we're getting the full story clearly, and that's. The bye week can come at a better time. That's the one. That's the one thing I worry about.
Well, see, that's my thing. I have this agree or disagree thing that I do every week that they ask me to do, and this week it is. The Eagles. This bye is going to really be big. That they're going to be a lot healthier. They're going to get Bradley Roby back. I think if we're being told the truth about Jalen's knee, which is something you brought up, that's always a question with these things. If it is a knee bruise, I think it should be much better with a week off. I think they're going to be finally ready to stop screwing around and actually play like the team that we expected them to be.
I think so too. Again, the schedule is going to be tough. It's a test. I think Kansas. Doesn't Andy Reid also have a bye this week? I think Kansas City.
Yes, he does. And
right.
That is a big deal.
You covered a lot of those, didn't you?
Yes. I think I was trying to look that up, which it's harder than it should be to look that up. Some Kansas City Star did a story in last year's playoffs where they said 27-4, and they were including all the postseason buys over the years.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So he would have gotten another one before the Super Bowl. So I guess it would be 28-4. Either way.
Yeah, and if you include those postseason buys, it means he's always playing a tough team, right?
Yeah.
He's not playing some donkey coming out of the postseason bye. He's playing a good team. Yeah, he's always great at it. But again, if you lose that game and then you beat Buffalo, Buffalo's a really disappointing team this year.
It is. I agree.
Yeah, right. And then after that is who they have before the Cowboys. Forget it's somebody then the Cowboys in Seattle. But again, win 3 out of 5 there, and I think they'll be just fine. Hey, if they finish 14-3, 13-4, they're going to have home field. And actually, I'll just say this, and hopefully we have time. The win over the Cowboys, the way the Cowboys just screwed that thing up and didn't allow the Eagles to give them the game, as you suggested, was so critical because now you have this big lead over the Cowboys, including currently the tiebreaker. You can afford to lose the Dallas game and still win the division, and that's everything. Winning the division is everything. Home field advantage throughout is great, but winning the division so you don't have to open the playoffs going on the road to Detroit or Seattle or wherever.
Yes.
That's the number one thing.
It really is. And I think, it's the Dallas took, from what I could see, exactly the wrong lesson out of that game. What you heard from Dallas was, well, look at the stats. We were, just an inch here and an inch there away from winning, which is sort of true. But if you watch the game, the Eagles played rope-a-dope the whole fourth quarter.
Yeah.
It was 28-17. All they had to do was put a couple first downs together, kick a field goal somewhere, and run a little clock off, and it wouldn't have been as close as it wouldn't have been anywhere near, them coming down to try to win the game in the final seconds.
Throw away the stats. Listen, it was a very close game, and the Eagles certainly had opportunity to lose it. If Dak Prescott doesn't step out of bounds on that one thing, the catch at the half-yard line, right, could have gone either way. But in the end, it is what it is. And the Eagles won the game, and the Cowboys lost the game, and that's it. There's no, we could have, should have, might have, whatever. That's all there is. Right. You lost. And the Cowboys, God bless them, have a great way of kicking themselves in the head. And I have to tell you, as a fan, I completely enjoy that.
Yeah, it'll be amazing if they ever get a different ownership in there with the marketing behemoth they have. And, they should dominate. Instead, they can't, they can't put anything together because it's such a circus, all the time. It's just, nobody will coach there who's like an up and coming, brilliant coach. Because you have an owner that gives a press conference after every game. Yeah. Well, on 3rd and 2, I thought maybe we should have.
It's great. Jerry Jones is such a great character for the NFL, and for those of us as to have him as like the evil, the villain of the story he's perfect. He's so well cast.
Indeed he is. Well, Glenn, I really appreciate you being with us on this gloomy Friday afternoon. And I really enjoyed talking with you, and I hope we get to do this again before too long.
Les, it's my pleasure anytime, my friend.
Thank you very much.
All right.
And we're going to have to go to another commercial here for Bowen on the Birds, and we'll be back with Brooks Kubena, the young writer who's taking over the Eagles beat for The Athletic and is off to a very good start, I think.
In our family, food is our daily bond. My Nonna, affectionately called Mama by many, found solace and joy in the kitchen, sharing her love through delicious creations. She turned her culinary passion into a flourishing business alongside her husband and sons in 1983. Celebrating 40 years is a testament to our exceptional team, friends, family, and beloved customers. With gratitude, we look forward to the future, expanding our brand to share the highest quality Italian food and wine nationwide. Our heartfelt thanks to everyone who has played a part in our story. Grazie mille.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom-reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
And we are back for the third installment of Bowen on the Birds on this gloomy Friday. I apologize for the way things look here. I never realized how much I rely on natural light doing this show. I do have one of those ring light thingies, but it's not penetrating the gloom on this really extraordinary Friday afternoon in November. But we have something else that can penetrate the gloom, and that is Brooks Kubena from The Athletic, who just came over to the Eagles beat from covering the Texans in the middle of the season. That has to be incredibly disorienting. But he's off to a very good start, and he seems like a smart guy. So we're going to ask him questions and stuff. Brooks, how you doing?
Well, that sounds like an interesting approach there. We'll see. Hopefully I got some answers for you. And I might need to put Brooks Kubena penetrating the gloom in my bio now. I don't think anybody's ever said that about me. So
well, there you go. There's first for everything. Yeah. So mid-season switch in beats. Now, I never did it quite the way you did. When I left the Flyers beat and came to the Eagles beat in 2002. I was leaving the Flyers in the middle of their season, but the Eagles were done. They were getting ready for the draft. So it was not nearly as crazy as this must have been for you. How do you get your feet under you in a situation like this?
Yeah, it's the first midseason move I've ever made. Last game covering the Texans was October 22nd. And packed up, got everything packed up by Wednesday, got in the car by Sunday, and by Thursday I was here. 30-hour drive, and throughout that trip, I just wanted to make sure that I knew as much as I could. We have access through the Pro Football Writers Association to have NFL Plus, so I watched every single game through condensed footage to get a sense of where this team was. I'd watched a few games live, but I'm sure you had your ways of taking notes, but I sat down and got out all the players down, went through all their statistics, went through all their backstories, went through the staff, the Eagles, just started making about 8 or 9 Excel sheets just to kind of break down the contracts and all that kind of stuff. So try to get as ingrained as possible so that I could not only know players, but why something happens and whether that's important and all of that, which ends up being institutional knowledge in the long run, but just to get my feet under me so I don't sound like an idiot whenever I wrote my first story. So it was a bit of a transition. I've had some mentors who've done the same in the middle of a season. It's nice to get started in the summer and in the off season, but sometimes life doesn't work that way. So
that's right. Yeah.
Opportunity comes knocking, you got to take it.
Well, I think you're doing very well so far. That Dallas game was quite a way to get going. A
little bit.
But you were able to capture I told you yesterday we were talking, you were able to capture the chaos and the confusion and everything that was going on in the back end for the Eagles in the final seconds of that game. And yours was really the only account that I read, frankly, that really got me inside, made me feel like I was there with these guys talking about that.
Well, I appreciate that. And, I'm glad you noticed that. That's the approach I took. And I feel like some of the things that writers and sports reporters can do from a game is try and capture what it was like, what things happen, what carries the emotion out of things. And I think there are several different approaches of way you could do that. But, I talked to Sidney Brown in the locker room after the game, and he was just very open about how he was feeling, what all the confusion that was going on towards the end of the game.
Yeah, that was a great quote you had from him.
I think it's great whenever players are so open about what they are experiencing, whether that's good, bad, indifferent, whatever. It's just what happened.
Yeah, the PR staff will beat that out of him real quick.
Well, I don't think so. I think it was fair, and I think it pretty much showed what was happening. And
I know, I'm just kidding.
It's throughout that game and what I had watched with other games the Eagles had played, like the Commanders, twice it felt like everything was on edge. And
yes,
throughout several other games, the Vikings came back and made a game of it and made it feel stressful. And I had talked to some players throughout the week about some of the stress throughout the year. I mean, they're 8-1, but it's like, you're fighting every single time.
Well, that's exactly right. They've had 3 one score wins.
It's crazy. And there's a lot to that about this team that shows that great teams are able to make those wins happen, and they've done it so far. But I felt like that moment spoke to the game, but also to the season, and also to the secondary, which has been some of the precarious part of this team as you start thinking about whether they can win a Super Bowl this year.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the thing about the secondary is, I read a stat about that today, and I've already forgotten it, so I have to look at my handy dandy notes. They only used, I think, 5 corners all last season, and they've used like 9 so far this season. Yeah. And that, to me, when you talk about the ends of games, I think there are 2 elements to it. That is certainly one. They've had chaos in the back end. They just have not been able to get early in the season. Some of the guys they were putting out there just had no NFL snaps behind them at all, and they might be promising players in some respects, but they were nowhere near ready to jump in and start, or play a substantial role at that point. I hope with the bye, I think Bradley Roby will be back. He'll play the nickel, and maybe things will calm down just a little bit. But that has been a huge part. On the other side of that is running out the clock. And that has been a huge problem for them, which no one really anticipated. I think maybe it has a little bit to do with Jalen Hurts' knee injury. And I don't think teams are respecting the planned quarterback runs as much as they would normally. And I think that makes it much tougher for DeAndre Swift and Kenny Gainwell to carve out 3 or 4 yards here and there. But I still think with this offensive line, they've got to do way better with that. But what do you see there?
Yeah, I think several points there. First off, Bradley Roby did say on Twitter in a response to a fan that he will be back next week, which is a considerable news considering, like you mentioned, all the defensive back shuffling that's gone on. According to Pro Football Focus, 11 defensive backs have played in the slot this year, Sidney Brown being one.
Yeah.
Eli Ricks has been the person who's done that most recently. And I actually covered Ricks a bit in college. I covered LSU for 3 seasons, and he was a big recruit between them and Alabama. And he was very open, Ricks, at the end of the game about the mistakes he'd made and how he wants to fix them. And Sean Desai, leading into the game, had talked about young guys that, he's an undrafted player. He came in and was able to make the team and has been thrust into a very difficult situation. But these are the games that he needs to step up. It's the NFL. This is a team trying to make the Super Bowl. So after 5 days after Desai said, well, we've got young guys and they need to learn from their mistakes, is when CeeDee Lamb had almost 200 yards in that game. So Eli Ricks, but
there's no universe in which Eli Ricks versus CeeDee Lamb is going to be a good matchup. Well, even if he learns everything he can,
we'll see how he develops into this. Yeah. He was a very good corner, and coming into in college, and as he's tried to progress, the coaches have been pretty invested. And again, I've only been here 2 weeks, so I can't even say that I've seen too much of Ricks and can offer a
well, I'm sitting in my living room watching this crap, so I'm not in much better shape than you.
Well, and with Bradley Roby coming back, he's a 31-year-old, 10-year veteran. I've seen we were ships passing in the night in Houston. He was a couple of months in whenever I first got started, and then he was traded to the Saints. But he did play fairly well against the Rams and the Jets. But there's no full sense that as a whole, the secondary, the way it's working right now, will progress into a middling secondary. Right now, they're giving up the most pass yards in the NFL. So we'll see how that changes. But then I believe a further part of your question, I forget. So you can.
Oh, I'm sorry. The running the ball late in games and Jalen Hurts' knee injury and how that affects that.
With Nick Sirianni, he was talking about this, I believe, Monday, in terms of I asked him about the last 4 minutes of the game, and they had 3 drives and about 22 total yards. And part of that, they were trying to run out the clock. And when you don't convert on third downs and you go 3 and out, that's not optimal to running out any clock. And they did want to get rid of some timeouts. So again, that goes to part of the run game there. The thing that I think is going to be interesting coming up is now that, Nick Goddard is, Dallas Goedert is out for at least 4 weeks, could be 4 weeks, that these run pass options, which Sirianni, I've realized, calls them run pass runs, have largely been involving Goddard.
He's a great blocker. Yeah.
But with Jack Stoll, he's not really incorporated into the passing game. I know since Nebraska, he's been fighting the stigma that he's just a blocking tight end, but that's largely what he's been in Philly.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
If they end up bending more towards the run, Sirianni's been pretty defensive about they're not the run game depreciating. It's leaning more towards the pass. Well, with Goddard out, does that mean that's going to lean more towards the run since your options are more towards run-oriented systems?
Yeah.
So I'd be interested to see how that plays out.
Me too. The Goddard thing is something we definitely want to discuss. I think he's important to the run game because he is such a good blocker. And I think Stoll is a good blocker, but he's not as athletic as Goddard. Right. Sometimes in these RPOs or in other types of run situations, they required Goddard to get all the way across the formation and block somebody. I'm not sure that's Jack Stoll's forte. We'll see how they, what adjustments they make. They did go without Goddard 5 weeks last season, and the most discernible effect it had on the offense was Devontae Smith caught a whole bunch of passes. He ended up being the leading receiver receptions-wise, not in yardage, but he ended up with 95 catches last year. So, he's way behind that at this point. But how else it affects them is really going to be interesting. I know they like Grant Calcaterra as a receiver. I don't think they like him much as a blocker. And he hasn't really proven much as a receiver. They haven't gotten him on the field that much. Now he's a guy that once quit football because of concussions, as you know.
Right.
And he's had another concussion. So we have no idea what the outlook is there. They have Albert O, who, was a big fan favorite in the preseason, but he has barely been seen since then. So, yeah, it's going to be quite a thing. If the trade deadline hadn't passed, I wonder if they would try to make some sort of move to get a tight end.
That's one of the things that makes it very problematic for them. But it's a situation where, at least with Goddard, you're thinking he might at least be back for the playoffs, which, given some calamity,
they're going to be in the playoffs. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Hey, Brooks, we got to go to commercial here. If you want to stick around, that would be very helpful to me. Yeah. And we'll get our final segment underway after this.
Hats.com is the premier destination for quality and fashion-forward hats and more, with designs for every style and trend. Locally based and run by Philly sports team fanatics, Hats.com can help you elevate your hat John. Utilize the easy-to-use guides at Hats.com to find your perfect size and style, and shipping and returns are free. Hats.com. Find yourself in a hat. Use code Philly for 15% off your order. Hats.com.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor, and fun. Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
And we're back with Bowen on the Birds and Brooks Kubena from The Athletic. I was just going to say during that Hats.com commercial, I probably could stand to elevate my hat, John. I ought to look into that probably, especially since my hair isn't elevating these days very well.
Yeah. See, my buddy, he's just turned 30, and he's worse off than you. He told me, Brooks, if I ever see a hat on your head again, I'm going to punch you in the face. So,
yeah, you've got plenty going on up there.
We're good. We're good.
Yes, very envious. Yes, but the Eagles at the bye. We were just talking about my agree or disagree question this week is I just kind of think that this. I'm positing that this bye is going to be very, very good for them. They're going to come out of it healthier. And they're going to finally stop screwing around and really play 4 quarters up to their capabilities. That might be a rosy view. I don't know. How do you feel?
Well, it's a great timing for them. Jalen Hurts said it himself. He's like, selfishly, I think this bye week came at the best time. And he's been dealing with his knee issue that's at the very least been a nuisance to him in the past couple of games. And, the way that he's played through it, it does seem like some time to let that heal a week will do him a lot of good. It's also in the middle of their toughest stretch. They get the Cowboys out of the way, but then they go Chiefs. They got, the Bills, the 49ers, and the Cowboys again. And the Seahawks are no slouch either. So to get themselves back oriented, ready to go through that, and give the coaching staff some time to work through those game plans for this tough stretch of games too. All of that is really at a great time. I was covering the Texans before this, and they got their bye week in week 5, and it seemed like it was way too early. Some teams, this helps them out in a great moment where you've got some players that even have some time to get settled, like Kevin Byard. He got traded within 2 weeks ago, and he's a Philly native, but like his family is still in Tennessee and gets a chance to visit with them for some time. And then,
well, also settled in the respect, I think he's still learning the defense, even
Sure.
though he's a veteran,
Right.
he just kind of had to parachute in and play 2 games, and he didn't look very good. So I'm kind of hoping that I think a defensive backfield kind of has to, there's communication that goes on there, and guys getting a feel for what the other guy wants to do and stuff like that. And that really hasn't happened with this group.
Right, and I think that's a fair point too. And you think about just getting possibly Bradley Roby back in the lineup against the Chiefs, and that kind of communication, getting to work together. I do wonder how much the players are going to be talking to each other in the back end of this week. I think probably a lot of it is just more R&R. I saw Jason Kelsey on social media the other day. He was hanging out with Andrew Whitworth, just getting a chance to get out and it seems like
Jason was on Thursday Night Football last night. I don't know if you saw him, but he actually helped. Al Michaels was as animated as I've ever seen him recently, with Jason there with him. I think Al really enjoyed that. I mean, we might keep our eyes on that in the future. I don't know what Jason's future is. Yeah, he did a very good job on there. I thought he was funny. They went through, they did the clip with him in the Mummers outfit for the parade. And he said, I didn't really know I would end up in an outfit that would make RuPaul proud, and it was a good line. He acquitted himself well. But talking about that secondary, I was looking at some things today. They only have 4 interceptions this season, which I frankly didn't realize before I looked, because I'm really not covering the team day to day like I used to. Slay has 2 and Blankenship has 2, and that's it. That's all they've got. They had 17 last season. Now, I know that the turnovers you get that's a lot of luck. There's a lot of randomness to that. Teams that get a whole bunch one year typically don't the next year. But nonetheless, you got to get more than 4. I mean, the teams are throwing against them so often, and that's one stat I kind of use to excuse some of their struggles is teams can't run on them, so they throw on them constantly. And so they give up a lot of yards kind of because of that. But if teams are throwing on you constantly, you have to catch one every now and then too.
Yeah, well, what's one of the biggest confounding things to me as I was researching the team is that the Eagles' pass rush is dominant. I mean, by all metrics, they're getting the sacks not only from the exterior, but the interior as well. And it's coming through not just in luck sacks. They're getting quarterback hits, hurries. They've got 3 guys in the top 25 in terms of quarterback pressures this year in all the NFL. So any defensive coordinator will tell you to get pressure on the quarterback leads to mistakes, leads to turnovers, and that it hasn't so much this year is quite surprising to me. And I think that has something to do with the high turnover rate within them. And you do have a pick 6 from Slay at the start of the season, and him and Bradbury both have had their picks, and I think partly because of their consistency, which is pretty much the only ones they've had all season. Some of the rest of that will come through, and it's obviously not just the secondary, linebackers too. Nakobe Dean, he's been hurt for several parts of this season too. So just getting that together, I don't know how to make those numbers jive right now. So
they do have some fumbles they've created in the pocket.
True, that's true.
But the interceptions just have not, and they've dropped a bunch of them, which it's hard to know what to make of that. CJ Gardner-Johnson was the big guy last year. He's gone now. I thought, frankly, at least half of his picks were just luck picks where the ball would bounce off somebody and end up in his hands. I didn't really give him a lot of, credit for those, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I did also the point thing. It's just striking to me. Last year, their point differential was plus 133. This year, it's plus 57. And they're being outscored in the fourth quarter, 70-60, which for a team that's 8-1 is pretty phenomenal to be outscored in the fourth quarter. You just don't see that. It speaks to me to a team that, in a way, it's a good stat because they're getting leads, I think, in these games, and they're not doing a very good job of sitting on them. They're not doing a very good job of finishing the play, I guess.
Well, they're 8-1, so they're at least finishing the game. So
yeah, they're one way or another, they're finishing
right.
the game.
You don't want to be in that position for sure. Like,
yeah,
but it like the Cowboys game, the Commanders game, and some others that were the Vikings game where they were up 2 scores and then suddenly it's kind of like what you're asking earlier, how does a team run out the clock? What's their fourth quarter play calling like? What's their 4-minute play calling like?
Mm-hmm.
And with the Cowboys, it ended up being 3 drives with no first downs. So, they had a big lead in the Super Bowl last year too. And seeing it's come back and win is, that's going to be a storyline going into next week's game. How does this team handle those situations that they've so far been able to hang on to leads? But when Dak Prescott's at your 4 and he gets sacked by Josh Sweat, are you going to get the same pressure on Patrick Mahomes? So it's a big question.
Absolutely. And I don't want to get too much into that game because we'll have another show before that game comes along. But
I don't think you're going to run out of content going into it, though.
Those of us who remember things here know that Andy Reid also has the bye this week. And Andy Reid, after a bye, I was able to look up. I knew it was a huge thing when he was here. I was able to look up in the Kansas City Star. They did a thing in the playoffs last year before the Super Bowl that he is 27-4 with a bye, including postseason byes over the years. That would have been before the Super Bowl, so I guess it would be 28-4. I'm not entirely sure that was up to date or that they counted right, but however you want to parse it, Andy Reid is tremendous after a bye. And that's something they're really going to have to fight in Kansas City. Is his teams just always seem to come out of that bye so well prepared for an opponent.
Yeah, I mean, for now, I just looked in the last 2 years under Sirianni, they're 2-0. So those are the kind of stats that have a lot of stories behind it. It seems like people get a lot more time to prepare. But to go back to my college coverage, whenever I covered LSU, they would play Alabama, and both teams would have a bye leading into that. So that would always mark for a really good matchup. And you got 2 hot teams. There's Monday Night Football. It's going to be a huge one. Yeah. So both coaches have plenty of time to get ready for this one.
And Kansas City, I've seen some of their games this year. They're not they're kind of like the Eagles a little bit. They're not hitting on all 8 cylinders. Their weapons haven't been what they hoped without Tyreek Hill. They don't have that get out of jail free card. It's been a little bit of a struggle for them. Their defense, I think, is playing pretty well. But offensively, not the team that just kept killing the Eagles the whole second half of the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I haven't looked too deeply into this yet, but it has been something said to me where people feel like this role has been reversed in terms of how the Eagles are playing this year and how the Chiefs were playing last year. I did a research story for my first story about Super Bowl champions in the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. And most people, in terms of EPA, it's an advanced metric that basically says how much likelihood is there for a team to score on any given play. Teams that had a top 10 defense in terms of EPA, those were ones that were constantly winning Super Bowls in that span. And if they didn't, the key difference is that they had an offense in the top 5 in terms of EPA. Now the Eagles qualify for that right now. Jalen Hurts is playing some of his best football. I know people turn towards his turnovers, but that's been a part of his career, whether it's been fumbles and interceptions too. But he's playing in terms of the offense very efficiently. So watching them play against the Chiefs, whose defense kind of seems to be in the mold that the Eagles were playing last year, helping the team out a lot more. The role reversal will be interesting to see because it seems like a lot of coaches have acknowledged sometimes that you can win with really good offense and okay defense.
Oh, absolutely, you can. That's the story of the 21st century of the NFL to me. It used to be the other way around, and now it isn't.
I kind of fight against it still because I think, I don't know if the Broncos are too old, but when you get a really badass defense in there and they just keep you from doing anything. Like,
depends on who you end up playing in the playoffs, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. But, I just don't think in the NFC anyway, I haven't seen a real defensive team come out of the NFC in a long time. Even the year the Ravens won most recently, it was Flacco had an incredible playoff.
The 49ers would have been that team last year. If they
would have been, yes.
Well,
but they
were
were.
more than their quarterback. I think that team probably is giving, maybe they had been in the Super Bowl at that point. So I know Eagles fans probably won't like hearing that.
Well, their offensive line wasn't good enough to keep all their quarterbacks from getting hurt was one reason. One thing that they didn't all just drive a bus, that got in an accident or something. They were all standing back there when they got hit. But you might be right. But I still think if you've got a great offense, you're in pretty good shape in the NFL these days. And unfortunately, we are at the end of our hour here. So I'm going to have to let you go and go about your Friday afternoon. Stay out of trouble. Have fun in Kansas City. Text me if you want. Andy Reid recommended a good barbecue place. I can give
Which
you
is that?
I think it's Q39 or something like that.
Putting that down. So it's not Arthur Bryant's, huh?
No, Arthur Bryant is kind of the touristy, barbecue place, I think.
Okay. Sometimes that's good.
Yeah, sure. And I don't want to find Arthur Bryant for anybody who's a big Arthur Bryant fan, but be that as it may. That's it for Bowen on the Birds yet again, and we'll be with you again next week. Thanks again to Brooks Kubena.